Anyway, thank you, Sophia, and for everyone joining us today. So yeah, we're from the Department of Environmental Conservation in the Waste Management Prevention Division. So we do all things waste reduction, composting, recycling, etc. And we love to talk about food waste. So, oh right, I'm trying to move the slides and I can't. So Anne, go to the next slide. There we go. Great. So I'm going to start and just really orient us to the problem with food waste, including some data on how much food is being wasted, why we should care about it, and why food waste happens in the first place. And then Anne will talk about some strategies that we can all do in our own homes to reduce wasted food. And then probably there's some time for questions at the end, and you can put them in the chat also. Okay, so first off, how much food is wasted? So I like orienting us with some figures. We're going to go through like a bunch of pie charts. You can go to the next slide. There's this really awesome nonprofit organization called ReFed, and they're completely focused on food waste, including having a component that does a lot of research. So they're really our best source of data at the national level of like what gets wasted and where and why. So these next figures are all from them. You can go to the next slide. So first, we're going to think about all of the food in the entire United States. So from farms, grocery stores, all the food that could be eaten, but how much of it is not eaten. So go to the next. So the answer is about 31% is not eaten. So this obviously, that's not terrible. You know, it's less than a third is wasted, but that's still a lot of food that could have been eaten, should have been eaten, and it's an opportunity for doing something better. Go to the next. All right, so this next circle is out of all of that wasted food, where is it happening? Is it on farms? Is it during manufacturing? Is it in grocery stores, in restaurants, or is it in our homes? So you're welcome to like think about what you think the top sector is, and Anne can go to the next slide. So this shows that the number one single source of largest food is actually homes. And I feel like this is often, it's kind of like flipped. So, you know, a lot of environmental problems, it's like, it's the manufacturing, it's the big scale. And obviously all of the sectors have impact, but the single largest one is just people like us. And this actually makes it a really cool opportunity because it means that things that we do in our own kitchens, our own eating habits, can really add up through collective action to make a big impact. Go to the next. Thank you. All right, so now what happens to all of that wasted food? And so basically you can think of it in two directions. Either it's disposed, like it goes to landfill, or it's not disposed, so represented here by composting. You can compost in your backyard. There's big compost facilities. So this next figure, you can go to the next slide, is the breakdown from the national level just of the residential component, and it finds that 65% of wasted food from people's homes across the United States is disposed. So with landfill, but then also some, you know, goes down the garbage disposal into sewer, or some parts of the country, you know, their trash goes to incinerator. So a lot of room for opportunity at the national level. Go to the next slide. But what's happening here in Vermont? Okay, so all of those previous figures were from ReFed, so national data. So this next one is our own data here in Vermont. That's fine. So in Vermont, 54% is not thrown away. So here, the 46% is primarily landfilled. And then this is looking at all of our food waste because we can't separate out like what came from homes versus what came from businesses. So that 54% includes the food banks food rescue program. It includes our compost facilities, also farms that compost, people who compost in their backyard. And then there's also some food waste, and especially food manufacturing waste, like from Ben & Jerry's, for instance, that goes to anaerobic digester. So this is the Vermont story. It's better than 50%, so clearly a lot better than the national story, but we still do have a lot of room to do even better. You can go to the next. Okay, so why does wasting food matter? Why should we care about this? Next. In Vermont, most of our trash goes to our one and only working landfill, which is way up in Coventry. A little bit less than 20% goes out of state, but most of our waste ends up going here. You can go to the next slide. And so if food waste ends up in the landfill, so that machine is a compactor, and its goal is to compact or to squish down all of the waste. And this is mainly so that it takes up less space, but that process also sort of squishes out all of the oxygen. You can go to the next. So when food waste ends up in the landfill and it gets squished down, there's no oxygen, but there are anaerobic bacteria that do start breaking it down, it releases methane. And methane is a really powerful greenhouse gas. It's much more powerful than carbon dioxide, especially on a shorter time frame. So food waste is not our largest component in the landfill. And in Vermont, it makes up about 18% of everything in the trash is food. You can go to the next. So this is from an EPA study. So again, nationwide data, but they found that even though food waste is a smaller component, generally like less than a quarter by tons of everything in the landfill, it makes up almost 60% of all of the methane emissions from the landfill. So the food waste really has a disproportionate impact in terms of emissions. So that's why keeping food waste out of the landfill is a climate solution. You can go to the next. But that's just the end of life if the wasted food ends up in a landfill. But of course, there's impacts all throughout the entire life cycle of the food. So there's, direct emissions of pollutants, greenhouse gas emissions. There's deforestation and soil degradation and water, fertilizer, and pesticide use associated with all of the farming practices. Then, of course, there's all of the packaging and shipping and airplanes and trucks, and humans, of course, are doing all of this work, which is labor. It also all costs money. So all of these impacts still exist and are thrown away when we don't eat our food. Go to the next. Okay, so why does food waste happen in the first place? Is it inevitable? And of course, the answer is both yes and no. You can go to the next. So we like to think of food waste as sort of two broad categories. So the first is the parts of food that are just typically not eaten. So these include your peels, rinds, cores, shells, pits, seeds, bones. And if you cook from scratch a lot, if you eat a lot of produce, you're going to end up with a lot of this category of food waste. And sure, maybe you can make the most of it by taking your veggie peelings and your chicken bones and making stock with it. But overall, yes, this food waste will happen. So the other category is food that's no longer good for eating. And this is where our real opportunities exist from eating this food before it goes bad. So this could include, plate scrapings if we served a little bit too much and we didn't eat it all, but it's kind of mushy and gross and we don't want to save it. Or leftovers that maybe we were so excited to eat it, but it got stuck in the back of our refrigerator. And by the time we got to it, it was all moldy. So these all count as wasted food, but they're all opportunities for preventing that from happening. Next. And so right now, I want you all to sort of think about your own food scrap container, because we're in Vermont, food scraps are banned from the trash, so hopefully you all have one, and just sort of put it in the chat. Why does food waste happen in your house? What do you put in the container the most often? And those photos can sort of serve as some prompts too. I'm sure we have all burned something and had, made something that we were excited to eat be inedible, or let it get lost in the back of our refrigerator, or served too much and had a party and there was just so much food that it didn't all get eaten, but it wasn't good to save either. So yeah, mushy leftover kid cereal, lots of that in my house. Moldy rolls, I know, so disappointing. Poor planning, yeah. Snacks that were gross. You're right, that can totally happen. Yeah, good intentions at the grocery store where you come with a plan, but then you buy something else and maybe we're too ambitious. Made too much and didn't want leftovers. Yeah, my kids hate leftovers. Nope, leftovers are a part of life. Buying too much as a single person. Yes, it's the best prices. Picky kids, leftovers from takeout. Yeah, so many great examples. And yeah, might as well go to the next. I think we'll shift over to Anne. Oh, So one more slide. So this is one more thing from Refed, but it's just sort of like breaking down at that national level. So all of these reasons that we're shouting out. And so the thing I want to first notice here is that the very biggest segment is the inedible parts. And that's great. We want that to be the biggest component of our food waste. However, that's obviously not the majority of all of it. So yeah, the next biggest category is things that were spoiled, could have been eaten but just didn't. I see the didn't want leftovers as a pretty big segment. And those two in the middle, I know Anne will talk about more, but those are really jump out at me because it's a pretty big portion of things that are considered inedible. Like broccoli stems are a great example. A lot of people eat them, and then a lot of people don't know that you can eat them. And then the date label concerns. A lot of food gets thrown out that maybe didn't have to be because people were worried about date labels. All right, I think that's the last one in the first half. Yep. So now Anne will talk about tips for how we can waste less food and save money.
Great. So, you know what? I'm just going to see if I can switch just to presentation mode here. Oh, did it go? Sorry about that. Let me try again. Okay. Okay, we'll just keep it that way. So how can we waste less food? Um, I'm going to talk about 4 different strategies overall, and I see some of them came up in the chat. The idea of better planning. So planning your meals before you go to the store, being more purposeful when you're shopping, and then creative cooking, being more free and less rigid in the kitchen, maybe shopping or cooking without a recipe. And then how to store foods properly. So once you get home from the store, how can you preserve kind of the longevity or increase the longevity of the foods that you just bought? And then we'll talk just a little bit about the wild west of expiration dates and signs of spoilage. So what to do when some of your food has gone bad and can you still rescue it? So the first strategy, planning and shopping smarter. So buying what you need, and hopefully eating what you buy. So if you can, it's great to plan your meals in advance. It doesn't necessarily mean coming up with specific recipes, but just having an idea of what you want to cook. But first, before you do that, you want to think about your week as a whole. Like, do you have a busy week? Do you have like kids' sports events or concerts? Are you going to be out a bunch or are you going to be home? So you want to think about um, what nights you're actually going to be cooking before you actually make your grocery list. Um, I heard the man who started the Cooks Illustrated magazine speak once, and he said, as like a home cook, you don't have to be preparing these, elaborate meals every night. And so to reduce stress in your life, come up with a list of like 20 to 25 meals that you rotate through so that I don't know about you, but like the most stressful time of my day can be like the evening when I'm like, oh my God, I have no plan. What are we making for dinner? Especially when you have multiple mouths to feed. It's nice. It kind of reduces stress when you have an idea of what you're making. So have that list of 20 to 25 meals, but then don't forget to schedule in a lazy night when you will eat the leftovers, hopefully, or something out of the freezer. Um, Let's see what else. But first thing, before you go to the grocery, when you're making your list, now that you have a plan, is to shop your kitchen first. So you want to especially look into your fridge and make sure that there are things that haven't snuck into the back that you really want to use first, and then try to plan your meals around those things. And that includes your pantry and your freezer too. When you're putting things in your freezer, it's really good practice to make a list of what's in there and when you put it in there. And then keep that outside the fridge so you don't have to be digging through the fridge all the time to find the thing that you should eat first. Um, so then once you get to the grocery, try to stick to your list. Be very purposeful and don't go on autopilot. And I think the old uh, advice about not going to the grocery store hungry, I think that's actually really good advice because you will end up throwing things in the cart because you're hungry and everything looks delicious at that point. And then I think this also had come up in the chat before, but you want to check in with other people in your household. Like, have they already gone shopping? Did they already get the bag of potatoes so you don't have to get another one? Um, and on that note, like, don't be swayed by the great bulk deals, because if you buy that 5 pound of potatoes, but you only end up using 3 pounds of it and, composting the rest, hopefully, um, then you wasted those 2 pounds, even though it was such a great deal, you just threw that money down the drain. So make sure you're being very purposeful when you're in the grocery, and not getting swayed by those great deals. And then last, try to, maybe on Friday have that can be one of your like lazy nights when you got to look and see what's in the fridge and cook up what's in the fridge. Okay. So then you looked in the fridge and you have a lot of rice. What could you make? These are some pictures of recipes that use up, or not even recipes, sorry, meals that use up things that might be in your fridge, or pantry that need to get used up. Also, why don't you put in the chat, like if you have favorite recipes? So like here on the left, is chili, and then the top is bread pudding, and you can make savory bread pudding or sweet bread pudding. And then fried rice is a general favorite in my house. I'm just reading the chat. Funny how chocolate never goes to waste in my house. Um, Me too. Um, okay, and so then let's see. Creative cooking. This has been a really good one for me to learn as soon as I've started this work, because I like to have a recipe and follow it. I'm not like a super confident cook. But if you can be a little more flexible, you can find that you can make new combinations, try substitutions. The internet is really great for substitutions. If you don't have something, just Google like what's a good substitute, and chances are you'll probably have something that they suggest. Um, but let's see, to go to the top, revive older foods. I think someone talked about loving lettuce. Well, if you have lettuce that has gone limp because it's been in the fridge too long and you forgot about it, lettuce and other greens can be like instantly revived instantly in about 10 to 15 minutes. Put them in a bowl of cold water. If you need them quicker, put some ice in there. And that's just a great way. They'll perk right up. If you have stuff that's really limp and it's not perking up or you don't think it's going to, just saute that up with some garlic, ginger, or put it right into a soup or a stew. And also that can work with like if you have stale chips or crackers, just put them in a hot oven for 5, 10 minutes. Just keep an eye on them so they don't burn. But they'll crisp up right away. Let's see. Ditch the peeler. Again, you're going to save time if you just get a good scrub brush and scrub those carrots. And the potatoes too. You don't always need to peel them, and a lot of the good nutrients are in the peel anyway. Um, so invest in a good scrub brush. Let's see, what else? We talked about making meals with what you have on hand. Oh, another great thing to do is to have like a jar of sauce. Like it could be a red sauce, a marinara or something, or there are a lot of great Indian recipes or Indian sauces out that you just, if you have that in your pantry, you pull it out, you cook up whatever you have in your fridge, add the sauce, you got a meal. We call those kind of hero recipes or hero ingredients. So another thing to have on hand are the recipes like the chilies, the soups, the stews, frittatas. If you have other ideas for those use it up recipes, put those in the chat. And again, don't be afraid of winging it. And also, like if a recipe needs, it says like half a cup of onion, but the onion you have is like 3/4 of a cup, just put in the whole onion, because chances are you're going to put that little quarter onion in your fridge and then you're going to forget about it. So just put it in the whatever you're cooking. It'll be delicious and you probably won't know the difference. Um, and one last tip, like if you ever accidentally burn a soup or a stew, a chef that I worked with gave me this tip. Take it, pour it into a new pot as soon as you recognize that it's burning. Put it back on the stove and maybe add some extra spices And hopefully you can rescue it that way and it just becomes like a smoky chili or a smoky stew. Okay. I think that's what I was going to cover on that slide. Okay, so then knife skills. I know this is one Alyssa really likes to talk about. So that pepper on the top left, if you just slice it right down from the top and open it up in two, and just with your hands even, or a paring knife, take out the seeds and the pith and the stem, and then you've got the whole pepper. A lot of people will slice the top of the pepper, slice the bottom of the pepper, and compost those. And you're wasting a lot of food that you just purchased. So it's pretty simple. Just slice it down the middle. And then when you look down the broccoli, hopefully most of you are using your broccoli stems, but stems are delicious. I often almost like them better than the florets. You might need to chop off just the edges, the kind of oh, what's the word I'm looking for? The more stiff part. But the inside is very delicious, and just slice that up and cook it like you would the florets. And then if we go across, I think, Alyssa, this was your picture. Are those kale stems? Okay. So folks can make kale stem pesto, or there can be other recipes. Yeah, I just see broccoli slaw is a great recipe. Um, and then just moving to the right, apples. Bruised apples make delicious applesauce. Just take out the core, put them in a pot with some water, some cinnamon, turn up the heat. You'll have applesauce in no time. And then the leeks. Sorry, I love to make soup with leeks, and but I always, you have all the greens at the end. And my brother-in-law recently taught me that if you just slice them up really thin, make sure they're clean because they can get pretty dirty. And he cooks them with some miso and some ginger and again garlic and makes like a sauce and then serves that on either rice or pasta. Okay, so basically my point here is try to use as much of the vegetable or fruit as you can. And so then the next strategy is just storing your food. And that top picture, it's pretty crowded, right? That's a freezer, but that could be somebody's fridge too. And I like to call this strategy like the Marie Kondo of cooking. So if you don't know her, she's a woman who wrote a book about kind of cre organizing. And the idea is that you see what you have in there. So a phrase I love that I learned in a different workshop is tastefully empty. So you want your fridge or freezer to be empty enough that you can see what's in there, and then use what needs to be used before it goes bad. And then with the freezer picture on the lower, or the one on the lower left, you want to make sure when if you have leftovers that you know you're not going to eat, put them in the freezer. Try to use a clear container and don't forget to put a date on there and maybe what it is, because sometimes you can't always tell, and you don't want it to go to waste because it's mystery food. Okay, so then what about things that you're not sure, should they go inside the fridge or outside the fridge? Avocado is a perfect one because they're pretty expensive, so you want to make sure you're storing it correctly. So if it's hard as a rock, outside the fridge until it gets ripe. Once it's ripe and you kind of have a short window to eat it, make sure you put it in the fridge, especially if you cut it too. You want to put it in the fridge and it'll keep longer. And I'm noticing my time, so I'm going to keep going a little bit. Let's see. Other fruits, though, that you might be storing incorrectly are apples. They will last longer in the fridge. Don't store your potatoes with your onions. They give off a gas, and it's not good for them. Nuts and seeds are best in the fridge, especially nut oils like sesame oil. And then make sure you put on your either you have a shelf. You don't necessarily have to have the eat first sign, although that can be really helpful for some people. But have a shelf in your fridge where your family knows that's where you put the things that need to get eaten first. Any good leftovers. So So then expiration dates. I said it's a Wild West because they aren't federally regulated. The only one that is infant formula. So all those other phrases that you're seeing, best if used before, sell by, prepared on, best if used by, those are just indications of quality that the manufacturer has put on the product. But they are not an indication of safety. So if you have something that has an expired date, if it's a can, open it up, smell it, look at it. Does it look right? Does it smell normal? Taste a little. If it tastes good, eat it. Great. But make sure you're trusting your own senses and not the dates. Let's see. And then spoilage. We've got some moldy strawberries. Strawberries can be really expensive and delicious, and they will go bad fast. But if you just cut off some of the mold, maybe not that big one in the middle, that might be too far gone. But many of them, you just cut off the little moldy piece and it's delicious. Bread too, and cheese, you can just cut off the mold and cut off, make sure you're cutting off all sides of the cheese, and they should be good to go. The only thing that really, if you see mold in it that you don't want to eat, is shredded cheese, because you can't tell, you can't get out all the mold out. So that should be either tossed or composted. And we have a few more minutes. We were just curious, I'm sure there's lots of people on this call that there's a wealth of information about other ways that you can store foods better, or recipes to use up food. The one thing, I did have one prop. I like to use props sometimes. And this is a great way to store fresh herbs. You want to put them in a jar or a glass with a little bit of water on the bottom, and then ideally put a plastic bag over it to create a little microcosm. And your cilantro will last a month instead of, a few days. So thanks so much. And feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand. And I'm just going to open it up for questions. Oh, and one last thing. If you need help, go to 802 Recycles to find your local solid waste district.
And there was a question earlier in the chat about tips for single people, or maybe even couples would benefit from this too. Do you have any directions or ideas for those people?
One thing I didn't bring up is delis. If you go to a deli, you can get the amount of sliced meat, or sometimes they'll have fried chicken or prepared foods, or go to like one of those bars. A lot of groceries now have the hot bars, and then you can just get a small portion, or just as a single person. I know it is hard sometimes to buy smaller portions, but freeze things. Like you can even freeze milk if you get too much and you think it's going to go bad. Alyssa, you might have some other suggestions too.
Yeah, just seeing if people are interested in sharing larger packages. I know, like, I often do that with my parents.
Mm.
And someone did have a question about the mold issue, and I find that generally, if it's a hard food, like the health sites say that you can cut mold off of that, but if it's soft, that you should be really cautious, because the mold can go farther than you can see.
I also just realized that, Alyssa, do you want to give a pitch for the food waste challenge?
Oh, sure, very briefly. So in the fall, in September, we will have our, I guess, third or fourth annual Scrap Food Waste Challenge. So we'll cover really all these same tips and information, but in greater detail. And so you can reach out to me or our website, which is scrapfoodwaste.org. Currently, it still has last year's information, so it's not ready to sign up yet. But it's just a preview that this will be coming in the fall, and that if you're interested, it's just a purely self-guided challenge. We send out basically newsletters that have a bunch of information that you can follow along, as well as some tips on how to actually measure your food waste if you want to try out a few things and see if you can make a difference in your own kitchen.
And Alyssa, when that is ready for people to sign up, will they know about it just through the HR Connect, or where do you all advertise
Yeah,
that?
great point. Yeah, we would love to put it in the HR Connect again. I think we have the last couple of years, so that's a great reminder. And then, yeah, that we'll definitely do that. Otherwise, it will be on our website. If you follow us on social media, which is VT Recycles on Facebook or the Vermont DEC on Facebook and Instagram, we'll post about it there also.